The quietest hours are often the most deceptive. When the world outside settles into its nightly slumber, and the hum of daily life fades to a distant echo, that's when the silence truly begins to deepen. For Lina, a young girl on the cusp of understanding the world's quiet mysteries, these nights were usually a sanctuary of peace. Her room, a cozy haven of soft light and familiar objects, would cradle her in its warmth. The moonlight, a silver sliver peeking through the curtains, painted patterns on her wall, shifting and dancing with the gentle sway of unseen branches outside. A comforting, predictable rhythm. But then, one night, the rhythm faltered. It began subtly, a sound so faint she almost dismissed it as a dream, a lingering thought from her waking hours. A whisper, barely audible, carried on the stillness of the air. It was her name. Lina, come here. The voice was soft, maternal, almost identical to her mother's familiar tone. It seemed to drift from somewhere distant, perhaps the living room, or just down the hall. A simple call, easily explained. Her mother must be awake, needing something. A child's instinct to respond to a parent's call. Lina, still half asleep, stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light. She listened again, but the sound had vanished, swallowed by the profound silence that had returned to claim the night. Doubt, a tiny seed, began to sprout. She debated, for a moment, whether to call back, to ask if her mother needed her. But the silence pressed down, thick and heavy, making her hesitate. Surely, if it was truly important, her mother would call again, or come to her room. The internal argument lasted only a few heartbeats. Curiosity, mixed with a sliver of unease, nudged her from the bed. Quietly, carefully, so as not to disturb the profound stillness, she slipped out from under the covers. The wooden floor felt cold beneath her bare feet. She tiptoed to her bedroom door, pausing with her hand on the cool metal of the doorknob. She peered into the hallway, a long, dark tunnel stretching into the deeper parts of the house. No light from the living room. No sound from her parents' bedroom. With a silent breath, she pushed open her door and ventured out. The air felt different in the hallway, colder, heavier. She moved like a shadow, her pajamas rustling barely audibly. Each creak of the floorboards underfoot seemed to echo in the vast emptiness. Reaching her parents' bedroom door, she gently pushed it open. A sliver of moonlight, diffused by sheer curtains, revealed them both, peacefully asleep. Their breathing was soft, rhythmic. A profound sense of quiet confirmed her suspicion. Her mother had not called her name. A chill, not from the cold, snaked its way up her spine. If her mother hadn't called, then who had? Or what? She quickly but quietly retreated to her room, pulling the door shut behind her. The warmth of her bed felt less comforting now. The incident lingered in her mind like a stubborn fog. The next night, the house settled into its usual hush. Lina, more watchful now, lay awake longer, listening. She told herself it was nothing, just a dream, a trick of the mind in the dead of night. But then it came again. Lina. This time, it was unmistakably different. Lower, slower, stretched out, as if the sound was being dragged, distorted. It lacked the natural cadence of a human voice, yet it was trying so hard to mimic one. It was like someone was attempting to copy a human throat, but couldn't quite get it right. A gravelly undertone, a slight rasp where there should have been smoothness. The inflection was off, a subtle, chilling wrongness that made her skin crawl. Her heart began to thump a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't her mother. This wasn't a dream. This was real, and it was coming from somewhere very close, perhaps just beyond her door, its unnatural call echoing in the silent house. She tried to ignore it. She pulled her blanket tighter, burrowed deeper into her pillow, squeezed her eyes shut. She willed it to go away, to be a figment of her overactive imagination, a trick of the old house settling in the night. But the sound persisted, a low, persistent drone that seemed to vibrate in the very air of her room, even as it came from beyond. It was a patient sound, waiting, observing, testing the boundaries of her courage. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Each night after, the voice grew bolder, more confident. The slight hesitation, the imperfect mimicry, slowly eroded, replaced by a chilling certainty. It was learning, it was adapting, and it was moving closer. One night, the whisper was no longer from the hallway. It was from inside her room. A cold, unseen presence lurking in the deepest shadows of her space, right behind her closet, or perhaps just at the foot of her bed. "Lina," it hissed, a low, slithering sound that scraped against the edges of her sanity. It sounded like it was right behind her ear, even though she was alone, pressed against the cool wall, eyes squeezed shut in terror. The horror of it was unbearable. The very air around her seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of this unseen entity. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking shape, every creak a sinister promise. Days turned into a blur of exhaustion and silent dread. She tried to appear normal, to laugh with her friends, to do her homework. But beneath the surface, a constant tremor vibrated, a knowledge that night would inevitably come again. One afternoon, unable to bear the burden alone, she confided in her closest friend, Maya. They sat in Maya's sunlit room, a stark contrast to Lina's dark nights. Maya listened, her expression shifting from concern to something more serious, ancient. "My grandmother told me a legend," Maya began, her voice lowered, almost a whisper despite the bright daylight. "It's important, Lina, really important," she continued, her eyes wide with a solemn warning. "It's not a person, it's a mimic, a thing that wants your place. It tries to draw you out, to take your identity, to become you. Never, ever answer if you can't see it." The legend solidified Lina's fears, giving shape to the nameless dread. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't her imagination. There was a thing, and it was after her. The advice? Never answer. A simple rule, but one that would test her resolve. The nights grew colder, the darkness heavier. The calls became more frequent, more insistent. The mimic was learning fast, shedding its imperfect husk, inching closer to a flawless replication of the human voice. It was perfecting its craft. Lina lay awake, frozen under her covers, heart pounding like a drum. The voice was now a crescendo of anxiety, a symphony of dread. It no longer just whispered, it called with a desperate urgency that preyed on her deepest fears. "Lina, I can't find you!" it shrieked one night from just outside her door. It sounded exactly like her mother's voice when she was truly distressed, worried, searching for her lost child. The mimic was playing a cruel game. A primal instinct screamed at Lina to answer, to reassure her mother that she was there, safe, to rush out and provide comfort. But Maya's words echoed in her mind, "Never answer until you see who is calling." She clamped her hands over her mouth, stifling a terrified sob. She could hear the mimic moving in the hallway, its heavy, shuffling steps incongruous with the perfectly mimicked voice. It was searching, its desperation a cruel performance designed to lure her out, to break her resolve. Then, the ultimate violation. The voice came again, loud, urgent, piercing the silence of her room. But this time, it wasn't her mother. It was her own voice. "Lina, I can't find you!" it cried with perfect, agonizing accuracy. A shiver of absolute horror seized her. Her own voice, calling her own name. A perfect echo, a macabre performance designed to steal her very essence. It was an invasion of the most intimate kind, a theft of her identity before her very eyes. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee, to hide, to disappear from this terrifying mimicry. Her bed, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, exposed and vulnerable. With a silent, desperate movement, Lina scrambled. She didn't run for the door, she ran from the door. Her small body slid off the bed, hitting the cold floor with a muted thud, and she propelled herself towards the tight space under her bed. It was a tiny, cramped space, smelling faintly of dust and old wood. But it was dark, it was hidden, and for now, it felt safe. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible, covering her mouth with both hands. The rough underside of the bed frame pressed against her back. Dust bunnies clung to her pajamas. She could hear her own breath, ragged and shallow, echoing in the confined space, a desperate symphony of terror. Outside her sanctuary, the searching continued. The voice, her voice, now moved deliberately, purposefully. From the hallway, she heard it calling, a low, searching sound, the very sound of a hunter seeking its prey. Then,